This year's festival is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors, BCTV, Bobby Bristol, the Family Foundation Works, the Vermont Arts Council, Vermont Community Foundation, the Vermont Humanities Council, and Vermont Public Radio, lots of Vermonts. We would like to thank our advertisers and encourage you to support them. The festival is running entirely by volunteers, so we encourage you to donate early and often. Take a moment to turn off your cell phone, but feel free to take pictures of Harry and Josh because they like their pictures all over social media. Harry Bliss is both a cartoonist and an illustrator. He grew up in New York State in a family of artists. His father, his brother, and his sister are also artists. He studied painting at the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts and studied illustration at the University of Fine Arts, earning a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Syracuse, earning an MFA. So he's illustrated many books and produced both cartoons and covers for the New Yorker. His children's books include A Fine, Fine School by Sharon Creech, Diary of a Worm, Diary of a Spider, and Diary of a Fly, all by Doreen Cronin, Louise, Adventures of a Chicken by Kate DiCamillo, and his new book, My Favorite Pets by Jeanne Birdsall. He's also the author of a self-titled cartoon collection, Death by Laughter, which has an introduction by Christopher Guest, and I believe he brought some of those with him, if I'm not mistaken, so we'll have some of those. Men, women, smug pets, relationships, hackers, slackers, modern life, and modern strife are all fair game in Bliss, a syndicated single-pane comic syndicated through Tribune Media Services that appears in over 50 newspapers in the U.S. and Japan. He is also an animal rights advocate, activist, and has regularly contributed covers for PETA's Animal Times magazine and designed sculptures for PETA that have appeared in major cities, an ongoing effort to stop cruelty to animals. Recently, Harry's been in the news for purchasing the J.D. Salinger House in Cornish, New Hampshire, but I'll let him tell you about that. Please join me in welcoming Harry Bliss.
Do I?
Huh?
Do I have enough?
You do.
Oh, that's news to me. Thanks for coming out. I'm actually not going to talk about J.D. Salinger, so don't ask if you have any questions. I'm not going to talk about it. So.
I'm at the cartoon program.
Yeah, no.
Specifically.
Actually, there is a fellowship program that I have worked with the Center for Cartoon Studies in White River Junction to set up a residency program at the house in the month of February. So I'll be working in the main house and the adjoining garage apartment. Some lucky fellow that we will vet will be working alongside of me, and that should be fun, as long as they don't burn the house down. So I'm going to just go through some slides and show you my work and discuss it. And if you have any questions, then great. I'm not going to use this mic though, because I'll yell, but I have to do this by hand. So, okay. It's funny, right?
Yeah.
That's a good one.
You want a lot of that?
What's that?
Validation, do you want a lot? We'll give you.
Whatever. You know, it's fine. It's a work day. You pay your fees or Babar breaks your pinky. So there's this is an older style. It's a new cartoon. Yeah. I grew up in libraries. I grew up in libraries. My mom took me to the library 3-4 times a week. And I took out art books all the time. From my high school, just an armful of books on Modigliani and the Renaissance, you name it. So I love libraries, love them. They're my church. That one's a mistake. I'm 4 days out of the week in New Hampshire, so working, and there are a lot of hunters around. A couple guys who take care of my lawns are the hunters, and so become familiar with, and a lot of Vermonters are interested. Let me call you back, Carol. This creepy guy I married keeps checking me out. This is married. This is what happens? You get married, you're supposed to be able to look at your wife and she look at you. But it's such an odd thing. When I try to comment on this stuff, because it happens to me in my life, and I hope that in some way that, people can relate to it, but sometimes it's very odd. This is a very rough sketch. It says, honey, please don't take this personally, but don't touch a fucking Any kids here? No kids? This is, I have a journal, and I keep a journal with me all the time. I have it with me, and I write and draw on it every morning and every night. And this is what the very rough ideas look like that eventually become what you had just seen. This one will never be published. Got cut off. He says, how long have you been working for Uber? That's Silver Surfer. I grew up in upstate New York, in Rochester, New York, in the 70s. And we would ride our bikes down to Empire Comics and Mount Hope Avenue. Me and my buddy, John Butler, and my brothers. And we would go in and just eat up any of the comic books that were there. Silver Surfer, Fantastic Four, you name it. Mostly monster stuff. He goes, yes, but we only burn remainders. It's kind of gag about, Fahrenheit 451. This cartoon had appeared in the LA Times, and apparently Bradbury saw it, and there's Bradbury with the cartoon. Sausage-like fingers holding on to him. He says, is it me, or is the Dalai Lama a great guy? My wife's a yoga teacher, and she's a phenomenal yoga teacher in Burlington, Laughing River Yoga. And she's particularly adept at digesting and explaining the philosophy of the sutras. But she said this to me, we're out walking the dog, and I thought it was really funny. Turned it into a cartoon. Again, appeared in the LA Times. A music journalist had seen it and was on her way to see the Dalai Lama, His Holiness. And she said, you're supposed to bring 3 gifts to His Holiness. See where I'm going with this?
Yeah.
There he is. You never know what journey your art will take. He apparently laughed so hard that soy milk shot out of his nose. That's not true. It's a New Yorker's cover that never ran. Martha Stewart, when she was incarcerated. She's in prison, and I thought it was funny, this idea, this notion that she would very meticulously be trying to dig her way out of prison, labeling the bags on the dirt, and this is unfortunately a timeless image. When Giuliani was the mayor of New York, that was shooting one of the boroughs of an unarmed African-American man. Yeah, unbelievable that this image is still happening. But this concept, this idea of these shadows somehow mimicking the reality came from my love of Mad Magazine and one particular artist named Sergio Aragoni, who used to do this and use this shadow motif in his cartoons. And this cover didn't run, actually, because at the time, Giuliani had I think, was diagnosed with prostate cancer. So they had some sympathies for him, which was a shame.
Run it now.
Yeah. It's just a joke. Just did this for me. I say I bought it on eBay. It's the lost Ludwig Bellingham's sketch in one of the books he didn't get around to work on. You can't see it, but he says, I wonder what it feels like to kill. It's way too curious. Another New Yorker sketch. Lots of New Yorker cover sketches. This is what they look like when I submit them. This week I submitted 2 sketches for the Bob Dylan issue that's coming out next week. I don't have those with me, but whenever there's a breaking news story, they send out an email to all the cover artists saying, get on it, we need something. This is a 4th of July cover I did for the New Yorker. That little man there is watching the fireworks on TV. And this is sort of a portrait of my father who suffers from social anxiety. And he doesn't leave the house very often. and he stays inside and watches Seinfeld. And, but he calls it Steinfeld. And he adores it. He loves it. The weather and Steinfeld. That's it. This ideas come. You never have a shortage of ideas. Really, honestly, I never. Life is so full of ideas. They're everywhere. You just have to be receptive to them. I was going to get solar panels in my house. They came out. Apparently, I didn't get enough sunlight to warrant me getting these panels. So the cartoon and my love of monsters produced this. This is cover edited for The New Yorker back in 2004. I was in New York City, walking by the New York Public Library, and there were pigeons on the back of one of these lions, sculptures that are there. And, you know, I just looked and thought it'd be funny if the lion came to life and gobbled the pigeon. That's a watercolor, highly rendered. This is a, it's called Forward Pass. She says, why, yes, my dear, it is organic. It's Maurice Sendak. I was honored to be a Maurice Sendak Fellow a couple of years ago, so I had a chance to meet him and hang out with him and get to know him and talk to him about life and music and depression and art and William Blake and Chopin. He was just such a great guy. There's his dog in the middle there, Herman. He's no longer with us, but we named him after Herman Melville. And when I visited Sendak, I got to hold a Melville letter in my hand that he owned, and also a Van Gogh letter he had. I held it, yeah, it's just remarkable guy. That's his studio. When I was a fellow, I got to work in his studio home, where he worked with Tony Kushner on various plays. And on that, there's a Crockett Johnson original right above where I worked for the month and a half I was there. So this Sendak Fellowship really inspired me to do the fellowship that I'm going to be doing this February at my house in Cornish. I think I'm so happy to be doing that and helping a young graphic novelist become the next great graphic novelist. It says, judging from our Facebook posts, we're really enjoying Saratoga Springs. That's kind of what the cartoons look like prior to me valuing them in with graphite. And this was done when I was in Cambridge, New York, during the fellowship. Saratoga Springs is very close, so this came from wandering around that town. This is a children's book illustration for a book that just came out by Jeanne Birdsall called My Favorite Pets by Gus W for Miss Smolinky's class. And it's adorable, and I love Jeanne Birdsall. We're doing some tour stuff. I think we're going to be in Manchester, Northshire Books, I think, at some point. Soon. This I did for my father, who, his brother, my Uncle Harry, was a fantastic artist, passed away. I did this one. Little stick. Says he finally called and it did kill him. Jewish. He finally called and it did kill him. Excuse me, which way to get the hell away from you? This happened, me driving, thought went right into my brain and came out as a cartoon. I travel all over the world visiting schools. I've been to Singapore, Moscow, St. Petersburg, Peru, Dubai, and various other places. This is me at the Singapore American School, working with the kids and drawing with them and whatnot. And it's a fascinating thing that I get to do. It's one of my favorite things to do, actually. I did an event yesterday here at the Latches Theater. It was just so much fun to hang out with these kids. That's one of my Uncle Harry's paintings. So done in the 70s. He was a big fan of Andy Wine, who I had the chance to meet, actually. But there's no time to talk about that. My brother Charlie, that's one of his.
Oh, I thought that was he.
Huh?
That's not your brother Charlie.
That is not my brother Charlie. No, he's much better looking than that. But this is, you know, he does these great acrylic paintings that are based on our love of comics, Marvel Comics, Monster Comics in the 70s. He gave me this for my birthday. That is my cousin Jim Bliss and his wife Noma, and they're working together in their studio in outside Albany, New York. That's my son Alex, who's is in his final year at School of Visual Arts, working in a documentary on my family. There are 12 of us working artists in the family, so we're still. It'll take years, and who knows, but. He works on it and then turns it and gives it to his wife, and she does her thing. Very interesting, terrific work. If you look their work up online, they're very talented. That's my father's studio in Rochester, New York, little town of Henrietta. And there are the Bliss. There's my uncles. That's my dad, the top right. This is from 1971. My Uncle Leon, Uncle Ken, and there's my Uncle Harry. I just love that poster.
Did one of them do the poster, make the poster?
You know, I don't know. I'm sure they had a hand in it, but those guys were, you know. But I love that. It's a great poster. It's one of my dad's abstract paintings hanging in the studio. I love that too. Let's see. You like that little transition?
Yes.
It's pretty cool. There's a couple others in there.
Can you do it again?
That's no, I can't. That's oil painting. A later, more recent oil painting my father did. He doesn't paint anymore, but that for a while there he would go back to Clarendon, Pennsylvania, and he would paint some of the people that he had known when he was a boy growing up in the post-Depression, 30s or late 30s, I suppose. That's a painting my father did of my mother working in her garden. My mother's a master gardener, and they're both insane. Are you recording this? No. They're awesome. They're awesome. That was my cousin Phil. This is his studio in Rochester, New York. Phil's also great, just like Jim, the brothers. We grew up going to their house and looking at their work, and Phil has, at the time, had really severe back trouble, so he had to lay down on a mattress and work this way, sort of Michelangelo style. That's one of my sister Rachel's paintings, and Rachel's really remarkable. Lives in Philadelphia, just so underrated. She's done a couple things for the New Yorker and illustration work, but she's just an exceptionally gifted painter. I can't say enough good things about her. You should go to her website too and look at her work. Yeah. This is one of Phil's doodles. If you friend him on Facebook, he'll probably accept your friendship. And he posts every day. He draws every single day, sketches, plein air stuff. This is a bit more, more abstract, I suppose. And at one point I asked Phil, I said, do you ever do acid? And he said no. But this transition may, if you're on acid right now, this beat the hell out of the author of the Da Vinci Code. Poor Dan Brown. That's like the bishop at the end there. He's so didactic, and his thinly veiled contempt clearly stems from the diplomacy he employs to keep the class functioning. He's an abominable English teacher. I don't know about you, but I can't believe the horrific grammar and the horrific use of the language that the media displays. You see this stuff? I can't believe it. Anyway, your mother wanted you to have this for good luck. This is Morley Safer's all-time favorite New Yorker cartoon. This is actually also based on a very famous Norman Rockwell painting, a cover for the Saturday Evening Post called Breaking Home Ties, and where a father farmer is, his son's going off to college, and he's sort of, lamenting his son leaving the family farm business. So it's based on that. This is my wife. That's my wife's my wife she's very smart. She has great ideas, and 90%. She sold 4 or 5 cartoons to the New Yorker, at least. There was one. There was a man and wife arguing, and the woman's holding the door for the man to go out the door, and the woman yells at him and says, "I hope all your chakras stay closed or remain closed." It's a New Yorker cover for this summer, very hot. Again, I love monsters. Growing up, watching these old black and white movies, big influence on me. It says, I'd invite you in, but my crap is all over. Charlie Brown, Bliss, right? I just love that Snoopy's got the little. That's one of my personal favorites. That's one of my personal favorites. I love Charlie Brown. I love Peanuts. The fact that this world was so not a child's strip. Questions afterward.
Okay.
Thank you. But it was like all adults. I mean, all kids in an adult world dealing with really adult problems. You know, Lucy was the psychiatrist, and Linus was into classical music, Schroeder was, and Linus was this intellectual, and Charlie Brown was just this really depressed kid. So it really spoke to me. This book is available right there afterward if you want to get it, and you know what? It's a really good book. It's filled with great gags, and it's a great stocking stuffer. Christopher Guest wrote the introduction, so buy it. This is a cover I did that I really wanted them to run when President Obama was inaugurated, and I wanted it to feel like to a certain extent, sort of those civil rights black and white photographs, and then there's the color the flag being color. I didn't like the cover that they ran. I often have disagreements with what they end up choosing, but that's the nature of the business, and I have to accept that. But all I can do for the New Yorker is just give them the best that I have. That's what I always say. I just send in the best work that I have, and if they use it, great, and if they don't, that's fine. This was a cover that almost ran. It was when Osama bin Laden was killed, and they, again, ran a cover that I didn't like. I'm also very opinionated. But the blood wasn't there initially. When I first heard that they had buried him, his body was in the ocean. In my mind, that was the cover, just the ocean, a very tumultuous kind of wavy ocean, evoking the uncertainty of the future. So it didn't run. I was all set to go to the Guggenheim when my mother called and totally guilt-tripped me into coming here. This is a fan letter, or an anti-fan. Your cartoon in the Chicago Tribune about the guy who was guilted into is antiquated, anti-Semitic, and not good for anyone. F you and your work. Issue an apology to all us Jews, and Jewish men in particular. I'm a Jewish man. Here's the next letter I get the next day. I'm writing you from the Jewish Museum in New York City. A recent cartoon in the LA Times is being passed around the staff here. Everyone loves it. Would like to produce a postcard featuring it to sell in the museum shop. Visitors, I'm sure, will also love it. Would you include the hospital license the image for us to use in a postcard? I look forward to it. This is when the NFL was getting in trouble. These players were hitting their wives and girlfriends, and this was the cover that I really liked because I liked the anger in the woman's her pose here with the child. They went with something else. Hey, you guys, check this out. I can see right into Neil deGrasse Tyson's bedroom. 1971, 2015. Totally autobiographical. Some genetically into you. These are cave people that are cave articles. I like this one. When we were growing up, we loved Bigfoot. We're all about the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot. I just like these covers. That makes me laugh. And then the old rather composted the McGregor boy, Belgian Endive out of him. Switcheroo there. It's a New Yorker cartoon. But I initially did this because this is from The Shining. Here's pollen. But you see that whiteout because I had to, the fact checkers at the New Yorker are very astute, very good. And they realized that those little thistles that fall off, you know the dandelion, and they fall, that's not where the pollen is actually. So I had to wipe them out and draw that. Walk the plank. You must be the artist. There's a New Yorker cover. It's called Balcony Scene, kind of a Shakespeare little dog. That's my dog Penny looking up at this other dog. I love New York architecture, and most of my covers actually are about New York architecture. Looking up, I had this great editor at Playboy who passed away too early, Michelle Urey. And when I would see Michelle in the city, she would say, "Look up," and she always said, "Look up, and look at that building, and look at that building," and it's such an education to be with her. So whenever I'm in the city, I take notice of the real beauty of the architecture in Manhattan, or any city for that matter. That's the wing of a plane. It's not clear, and I might revise this, but when I was flying in from a flight to Manhattan from somewhere, I looked down and I saw that, and I thought that would make an interesting cover. Looking down at the city. So, kind of Thanksgiving. Doesn't want to be shallow. It's another New Yorker cover. Sorry, this is getting cropped out. Oh, you know what? I just realized I could probably lower this. See the back? It's kind of a hazard. Is that better? Yeah. See that? All hell is broken loose. Hold on, I'll get it. Marilla, I want Bliss, will you? Just takes I'm gonna leave it at that and see if it does anything. Yeah, I was walking up to, that'll go away. I hope it does. I was walking into the new New Yorker offices and coming up from the subway, and I looked up, and that's where that came from. This is my journal, so this is when I was in Costa Rica, so constantly drawing, constantly writing, and I love pens. I love quill pens, fountain pens, I should say. I just love the way they hit the paper. There you go, a couple bird watchers. A little juxtaposition of take on birds. Zoloft, I knew it! Let's see. Oh, remember. Oh, and remember, Mother hates you. He replied, "Oh." This book I did, Grandma in Blue with Red Hat by Scott Mention. I should mention his name. Sorry. It's about this kid who just a little kid who. I'm really proud of this book, and I think Scott. I love the story in this book where he finds out. Well, you'll have to read it.
Don't tell.
No, well, it's he lives in New York and he goes to art classes at the Met on the weekends. His grandmother takes him, and he loves his grandmother so much. And in school, in this art class at the museum, the teachers instruct him, and they talk about the different paintings, and the little kids say, "Oh, this painting comes from very far away. This painting, is beautiful. This painting is like no other painting." And then he eventually realizes that his grandmother has all of these qualities too. And he says, "I want to put Grandma in the museum." I won't tell you what happened. This is actually a book that I'm working on right now, so I thought I'd bring this. It's not finished. It's a comic book. It's 40 pages, and it's about this little girl who, she is very empathetic to the school hamster, the class hamster. So she does her best to raise money to help this hamster, as you know, I'm an animal rights guy. But you can see that the sight gags are everywhere. There's Donald Trump and this guy's reading, this is Ken Burns right there. There's just, what I try to do is, that's me over there. But I try to, as much as I possibly can, there she is on the subway. There's Woody Allen too. So, but the idea with this book in particular, as most of my books, is to, on the outside of the action of the narrative, is to provide the adults, actually myself, I do it for me, but I know that parents are reading these books to kids. So I know that the parent is probably going to appreciate some of the sight gags, as long as that doesn't interfere with the main theme of the story. Because I'm not a fan of sort of children's books that are really for adults. And you know what I'm talking about. These, they're films, they're animated movies where some of the humor the kids just don't get at all. But in this case, they don't have to get it. I think it's important to see a parent laugh with you in the process when you're reading the book. I know that must be great for a kid to see that. Thrice baked potatoes. 3 times they are baked. Seems redundant to go on the politics page. These are very recent cartoons, by the way. These come right out of, there's a sketch for you. That's a Hollywood Legend of Smolinky. I don't really have any, I listen to the news and that could have been Hillary's head. I don't know, given what's going on. I don't know. I'm going to exercise my Second Amendment rights, see how that feels, then maybe go with the Fifth Amendment. Live free or die, baby. This is a political gag. Jeez, that barn is right up the street. What's that look? Come on, you're scaring me. That's funny. She shot a bald eagle. The dog, the guy's face. Come on. The New Yorker, that was fun. There you go. I was reading Moby Dick. I'm still reading Moby Dick, actually. And I just saw those guys in couples there. He hates that great white sheep. He hates that thing so much. So they got to work this out, man. They got to figure things out. Apple flavored and acid. Poor teachers. Two wives say, they grow up so fast. Husbands. One night each autumn, the old sugar maple on Lang Road quietly flings a nest of slumbering squirrels into far reaches of the I live on Lang Road, and that's Mount Ascutney. Artie, they took my bull. This cartoon I really like because of the backstory implied, and that I could just see the robbing the place, taking the TV, and all the really expensive jewelry, and all the dog really cares about is it's a tough one because I was trying to figure out what would be an Amish man's midlife crisis. Cheetahs. So if you guys have any questions, I would be happy to talk about stuff, because that's the end of the visual part of the presentation. We get the lights on, maybe turn this off. Yes, sorry.
When you were doing the Charlie Brown,
Yeah,
when he was
he was about to circumcise this.
the incorporation of those do you have to get permission? What I'm trying to ask.
No,
Is that
it's
public?
parody, so it's called under it.
But I mean, and you can mimic them exactly,
Yes.
and it's okay.
Yes, it's a parody law, so you're allowed to parody
I had no
characters.
idea.
Yeah. Now, if I wanted to make T-shirts out of that, which ironically the New Yorker, no, they probably don't. I couldn't do that, but it's a news magazine.
So you can emulate anyone's style.
And yeah, well,
I mean,
I probably couldn't.
if you could, if you-
emulate Rembrandt, but yeah,
And it's okay.
yeah, it's legally. Yeah. Yes.
So do you participate in the New Yorker caption cartoon contest?
Yeah.
And
I
so
think
how
I
do you
had
go
one last
about
week.
choosing these three?
Well, when we first started the contest, they would choose from our batch of 10 submissions. And they were looking for incongruity in the drawing. And the one that I recently did was a huge cat, and it's kind of a spin-off of the Incredible Shrinking Man movie. And a huge cat, and there's a guy there with a pin and a thimble. And that was a captionless drawing that I intentionally did because I knew I didn't have a caption for it. I just did the drawing because it was fun to do. But I also thought it might have made a difficult caption contest drawing. But sometimes they just pull them out of the batch and remove the caption and say, we're going to buy this and use it for a caption contest. I'd say 50% of the time that's what happens.
So you got any tips?
For captions? No. I really don't. Yep.
Hey, I happened to walk in, my daughter and I, just when you were showing the two comments of whatever the cartoon was, but the Jewish,
Yeah.
right, and the opposite points of view.
Yes.
And I was just sitting here, and I don't know, do those show up anywhere in the periodical? Could the person who had took offense ever see, the comment of the person, the group of people who thought it was great? Could you ever send them each?
I don't have the time to do that. So that's a great idea for those guys to somehow become aware that this world we live in is far more complex and nuanced than they seem to think it is. But
It's hilarious. So
yeah, I thought it was very funny too, and I don't know. I can only become so involved. I like to see it, and it's fun to share with you guys. But
well, you're obviously very involved. The spectrum of what you just showed us was just tremendous.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's a lot of fun, I have to say. Anybody else? Yeah.
So you said you're one of 12?
Yeah.
And you're all artists in one way?
Yeah. There. It was an interesting childhood, and my parents both super gifted, and like I said, my sister and my brothers, even my brother John, who's a charter school, founded a charter school, and he draws really well, and it was a zone for us in a somewhat tumultuous decade, I think. And I tell kids that escaping whatever trouble might be going on in their life art is a great way to do it, or music or anything. So it's a real meditation. It's not just our house; there are our neighbors too. I think there was something in the water. Really, because my next door neighbor, my dear friend John Butler, who owns an ad agency in Sausalito, is so talented. So talented. So, yeah.
Yeah. How did you decide to go into cartooning rather than fine art?
Yeah, good question. Well, I was in Nyack, New York at the time, and I was with my son, who was running around the playground, and we stopped into a rare bookstore, and at the time I was illustrating book covers in a kind of an academic tradition. Mysteries, a lot of mysteries, Fiona Buckley, some English writers for St. Martin's Press, very highly rendered stuff, and employing all the stuff I learned at the Academy. And I pulled out a book of Charles Addams cartoons. And I looked at these cartoons, and I had a bit of an epiphany, remembering that the New Yorker came to our house every week, and knowing that Addams cartoons were very funny to me. I understood those. They were timeless gags, and they were beautifully rendered. So there was a moment where I thought, this makes sense to me. And I was also a class clown. I always loved getting laughs as a kid. It's really important for me to make people laugh. So I shifted over, And I've learned over the years that cartooning is far more difficult than traditional painting. It's just, I love Toulouse-Lautrec or Degas, just brilliant, but cartooning is very difficult. It's very, very hard to use that economy of line and get that gesture and expression. People like Walt Kelly and Pogo and Charles Schultz, and there's some great cartoonists. James Stern, right over here in White River, is a great cartoonist. So it's really difficult to do. A tough discipline, that hand control it takes. And you have to be tuned into a certain sensibility about the zeitgeist and your own zeitgeist within yourself. So it's really hard. It's a real challenge. But I love it because it keeps me tuned in. Yeah.
And you send 10 cartoons a week to the New Yorker, is that?
Yeah, just about. Yeah.
So you have that rejection too, that
Well, fortunately, I'm syndicated internationally, so all the rejected cartoons that the New Yorker does reject, which lately is not, they've been buying one a week, which is nice. That's a good percentage for me. The other 9 go into syndication, and I like them, and the ones that are too irreverent to run anywhere end up in 7 days. They'll publish anything. So, and others I'll just post. Yes.
Are there cultures other than ours that are tuning into you and your sense of humor? And some that just can't get it?
Oh, I'm not so sure. I mean, Canada seems to like me. Japan likes me. I think one of my Bailey books is being in South Korea. They just picked up the rights for my Bailey kids book. So, and they seem to that sensibility and that sense
How
of
about in
humor.
Germany?
I'm not in Germany, so I don't know.
Okay.
I'm sure that, I think a lot of the humor is kind of universal about relationships, and I think people from all over can relate to that. Human interactions and the ridiculousness of everything, Yeah.
When you're coming up with your ideas for the New Yorker comics,
Mhm.
or just, the one-panel comics, do you get the image first, or do you get what's your process? Or do you write the?
Yeah, that's a good question too. Well, the journal is immensely important to me. And over the past few years, a lot of my ideas come from what I'm reading. I was reading the New York Review of Books. I'll get a slew of ideas from reading the New York Review of Books. I've been collecting modern library editions. I have probably 300 or 400 of them. And if I read Thorne Smith, who's a great British novelist, is hilariously funny. Topper Returns, they made a Cary Grant movie. So a sentence structure will hit me. The way the words from a paragraph from, say, the Melville will describe something, or Charlotte Bronte, or whoever I'm reading, just those few words will strike something in my brain, and some lobe of my brain will fire up, and it'll somehow interact with another lobe that maybe is a memory lobe. I don't know, but it's really it's very cool when that happens, and I'll write it down, and I'll see it all in kind of a flash. It's not perfect, but it's a cool it's my favorite thing. The process. Process. It's such a vital part of what I do.
Sarah can hang around and ask a few more questions and answer, but Josh is patiently waiting
Yeah.
to do his presentation.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
let's get him up here,
Yeah.
and then
So we're going to switch to a different kind of comic. Josh Neufeld was born in New York. He graduated from Oberlin College with a BA in art history. He's the author and artist of nonfiction graphic novel A.D. New Orleans After the Deluge, which was written about Hurricane Katrina. Many of you may have seen this because it got a lot of publicity. He's also the illustrator of the best-selling graphic nonfiction book, The Influencing Machine, Brook, Gladstone on the Media, and he's the co-editor of Flashed, 7 Stories in Comics and Prose. He was a Knight Wallace Fellow in journalism at the University of Michigan, and he was an Atlantic Center for the Arts Master Artist. He's a contributor to the Nib, a space for political cartoons, comics journalism, nonfiction, and his illustrations have appeared in such publications as the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal. As part of the U.S. Department of State's Speaker and Specialist Program, Josh traveled abroad as a cultural ambassador, meeting local cartoonists and conducting workshops in such countries as Burma, Mexico, Egypt, Algeria, Bahrain, and Israel, Palestine. Currently, he is the leader of the Comics and Graphics Narrative Concentration at Celsus Low Residency MFA in the creative writing. He lives in Brooklyn with his wife, novelist Sari Wilson, and their daughter. Please join me in welcoming Josh Neufeld.
Hello, folks. Let me get my thing working. It's really, it's nice to be here. I feel very fortunate that Sandy invited me. I feel like I kind of got in on the coattails of my wife, Sari Wilson, who was just meeting with Dennis Beata earlier. And I'm very grateful for that, and glad to be up here with you. Let's see. Oh, looks like it worked. Okay, that's me. So I'm going to skip through some of this other stuff that I've done and just talk about AD, New Orleans After the Deluge, a little bit. Oh, and by the way, about the Solstice Low Residency MFA program, there are some brochures in the back for those of you who may be interested in getting your MFA in comics and graphic narratives. And the brochures themselves are little comics themselves, so little keepsake. They're in the at the front table over there. AD New Orleans After the Deluge is the true story of 5 different groups of people who lived in New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina. I went down there and interviewed them as a journalist many different times over the course of 3 years that I was working on the book, and told their story in comic book form. The book sort of details the events of Katrina, the storm, the breaking of the levees, the overtopping of the levees and Lake Pontchartrain, the after effects of the storm, and sort of what it's been like for that community to rebuild in the years since then. And there used to be an image there, so we'll just skip ahead to this one. It actually, the journey to AD started when I, just as a human being and a citizen of this country, was so moved by what I saw happening down in that region that I volunteered with the Red Cross and got trained as a disaster response worker and was deployed down to Biloxi, Mississippi, about 90 miles outside of New Orleans, where I worked in a feeding capacity on this ERV, this emergency response vehicle, drove around neighborhoods that had been devastated by the hurricane, where folks were still living and trying to rebuild, and basically we served 2 hot meals a day to them and helped them get back on their feet. And really it was complete devastation in that area, actually much worse physical devastation as a result of the hurricane and the storm surge than what you saw in New Orleans, where really, if you know what happened there, the city, most of the destruction of New Orleans was due to the levees overtopping and not having been built to standards to protect even a level 3 hurricane, and Katrina was a level 4 hurricane. But here in Biloxi, it was really as if bombs had been set off all along the coastline in terms of the amount of total devastation that we saw. And the only reason I really mention this, this experience of my own is that it really formed the background research for what later became the project, because I'm not in the story of AD at all, except as the interlocutor, as the journalist. But we did get a chance to visit New Orleans while we were on our deployment, and this was a photo that was taken right after the city finally had been pumped, the water had finally been pumped out. This was an area that had, I don't know, 6 feet of water or so. And this image always struck me, this boat that had been abandoned at a car gas station. And this was the sort of thing that we saw everywhere we went. These marks that had been left by the search teams, the Coast Guard and other organizations that were there trying to help people, and documenting sort of when they'd been there and the status of each individual dwelling, whether there were people trapped inside, animals, dead bodies, dead animals, things like that. And it sort of shows you, that at this point there was still water and they were coming through to check. So people often ask, why do you use comics to tell this kind of story? And I mean, at this point, I hope people know that comics aren't just for kids, and they really can tell any kind of story. And for me, I feel like comics offer the reader a particularly intimate experience. I think that they're a powerful way of bringing a subject's real experiences directly into your consciousness, and when they're done right, they can really make you feel that you're there. And Scott McCloud talks about this process in Understanding Comics, one of the great works of comics academia and a comic book itself, the concept of closure, where the reader is sort of filling in the gaps in between the panels and really actively being part of the creative experience in a sense. And also there are things that you can express in comics form that you can't tell in words, and maybe they're not literally true. Like, this is not the way the hurricane looked as it was looming over New Orleans, but it gives you quite a powerful sense of the ominous of that experience. This is a little bit about McCloud's theories of closure. And when I was doing this book, I was focusing on what I saw were vital issues related to the storm. Not only the lost lives, the flooding, the personal displacement, the loss of so many material possessions, but also the virtual abandonment of thousands of people at those shelters of last resort, and the misleading media coverage of those events. I always ask people, now it's getting farther and farther away in history, but I always ask people to raise their hands if they remember these stories of violent gangs that assaulted and raped people at the convention center and at the Superdome, and dead bodies that were stacked in freezers, and the abuse of children and all sorts of stuff. And I always get a lot of people raising their hands, and then I ask how many of you know that basically all those stories were fabricated rumors that had been reported as fact by people who should have known better, and the media covered these stories without checking what the truth was, and later had to retract sort of all of that information. So I felt it was really important to sort of document in my way what actually happened there. One of the main characters in the book spent a good chunk of time at the convention center and saw what was really going on there, and I tell her story in the course of the book. I also covered this story in a way to, I think, to deal with some of this, the emotional overload that I had experienced as being a resident of New York City after 9/11, or during 9/11, and sort of trying to deal with that sort of post-traumatic experience. And I did do a comic book treatment at one point, but I think that I was still sort of processing that, and I felt a very deep connection to the people of New Orleans for what they had gone through. And that's, I think, what led me to volunteer in the first place, and then later on to turn it into a comic. And the comic is, these are the characters of this story. All of these are real people. Basically I tell their lives, what their lives are like before the storm, sort of how they prepared for it, the various ways. Some of them stayed behind, some of them packed and left, how they dealt with the storm if they were still there when it actually hit, when the flooding started to happen, as it got really bad, and what were the repercussions of this story for these people. How did it totally change the course of many of their lives? Some of them were not able to return home for many years, or were not able to come back to the home that they had lived in before, and how the city, even now, more than 10 years later, is still recovering. Of course, this book came out in 2009, so it was a much more recent event at that point, but it's discouraging to see how little in some areas has really changed. I'm not going to really go, I feel like we're a little short on time, so I'm not going to get too much into the details of each of these characters' lives, because I want to show you some other work of mine, but this sort of gives you a sense of the scope of the story. Like I said, I spent quite a bit of time on the situation at the Superdome, or at the convention center, which they were very similar experiences. And as I said, talking about the aftermath of the story, what it's like to return home to an apartment that's been completely destroyed by the flooding, what it's like to actually have to clean out to do that kind of work, and the horrible health conditions in that sort of situation, and how long it took people to clean up and to return home again. And this is something I always throw up on the screen just to remind people that these were actual people, who most of whom I'm still in touch with, because last year I did like a 10-year later follow-up sort of story about where these people are in their lives. But yes, they're real, they exist. I'm not so great with likenesses, so don't look for them to look exactly like themselves, but I do my best. So yeah, that's AD. So I also want to just give you a little sense of the scope of the rest of my work. I do consider myself a comics journalist, but I also, so part of that is the journalist part, as demonstrated in AD, but I also feel very much the artist part of me is an important component in that storytelling. So there are creative licenses that I use in the course of telling a story like AD. There's one character, actually, he's the guy in the middle picture down at the bottom behind Hamid, who I never actually met and was not able to interview. At that time, he was so traumatized by the experience that he didn't want to talk to anybody about it and had left New Orleans and gone to Atlanta and was staying on the couch of some friends, and he was not available to be interviewed, yet he's an important character in the book. So I sort of had to create this character based on the descriptions given to me by his best friend, and who, you know, narrated to me what their conversations were like and so forth. So in the course of telling this book, it was really important to me to not end up just with a bunch of talking heads of people saying, well, then this happened and then happened, because that doesn't feel like the best use of the comics form. The best use of the comics form is to throw you into that experience and make you feel like you're there. So in a sense, I was recreating moments here and there, and there's some poetic uses of foreshadowing and other devices familiar to more creative nonfiction. Still, like, if there are any words that are in word balloons of any of the other characters, those are actually the reported words that I recorded from them. But the art side of me, the artist side of me, is still feels very powerfully like there's a lot to be done with the comics form. So one of the things I really like to do is collaborate, and I collaborated with the poet and memoirist Nick Flynn. Some of you may know his work. This piece is almost 20 years old by now, but it was really great. He approached me about collaborating, and basically he gave me a poem of his, Cartoon Physics Part 1, which is maybe one of his better known poems, and it was just this blank slate. He said, do what you want with this piece. So I read it, and I'm going to show you what it looks like in comics form. Now, you have to understand, it was actually a 2-page spread, and to make it easier to read, I had to chop it up panel by panel, so that kind of takes away a little bit of the overall effect of it. And also, pardon me, because I'm not a poet and I don't know how to read poetry the right way, but I'm going to do my best here with this piece. Children under, say, 10 shouldn't know that the universe is ever expanding, inexorably pushing into the vacuum, galaxies swallowed by galaxies, whole solar systems collapsing, all of it acted out in silence. At 10, we are still learning the rules of cartoon animation. That if a man draws a door on a rock, only he can pass through it. Anyone else who tries will crash into the rock. 10-year-olds should stick with burning houses, car wrecks, ships going down, earthbound, tangible disasters, arenas where they can be heroes. You can run back into a burning house. Sinking ships have lifeboats. The trucks will come with their ladders. If you jump, you will be saved. A child places her hand on the roof of a school bus and drives across a city of sand. She knows the exact spot it will skid, at which point the bridge will give, who will swim to safety, and who will be pulled under by sharks. She will learn that if a man runs off the edge of a cliff, he will not fall until he notices his mistake. So this is the way that piece looks, the way it's intended to be seen. And you can see that it's actually one tableau. But again, I had trouble reading it even that size. My screen is small. Okay, so this is another piece, sort of in the same vein. This was a piece I did with a New York theater troupe called the Civilians. They're quite exceptional, really interesting organization. What they do is they do a big process of investigation and reporting into certain topics. And then they create a sort of cabaret-style show involving, like, Broadway musical type numbers. Again, at the same time, based entirely on journalistic accounts and nonfiction reporting. So this was one of their shows called Gone Missing on the subject of loss. And again, they just gave me verbatim a monologue, essentially, something they had recorded from somebody, and asked me to translate it into comics. So this is no words. Ring! Trey, hello, how are you? So I was living in Fulbourn. This was in 1976. I had just divorced my first wife and I was incredibly depressed, sleeping with anyone I could and drinking and doing drugs and so this is the bit. I woke up in this room in some college in Cambridge. I didn't know who I slept with or who was next to me in bed, and so I stumbled out of bed and I got dressed and started to walk to Fulbourn, which was about an hour's walk. It was the beginning of dawn, so the light, and the sun was coming up, and I remember thinking, there was a lamppost, and the thought I had, I remember what I wanted to say. The sun has come up and the lamppost is still on. But when I got to the word lamp, I couldn't think of the word. The word was missing. But it wasn't like I had forgotten what the word was. I'm not explaining this very well. Look, Trey, they didn't exist then, of course, but it was like my mind was a computer and the word had just been deleted. I was racing my mind, trying to get the word out before it was deleted from the other side. I was walking along the railroad and there was a big fence and I'd think, well, that's a big... Or I'd look down and think, I can see my shoe. Yes, that's it, yes. Like I'd never been told the name of it, but I knew what it was, what it did, just not what it was called. And by the end of the walk to Fulbourn, I had lost all words. I sat around the house with my friends, and I remember just going about my normal everyday business, eating, sleeping, but I wasn't talking. And when I woke up, my language had returned. Is that what you wanted? Good. All right, Trey. Good luck. Bye. So, how are we doing? Do we have a little bit more time, Sandy?
Let's see, we have
Or should we
like
cut it
6
there?
minutes. So, if you want to.
If there's any questions, maybe it's better to do that. Okay, let's cut it there, and thank you guys very much. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to. Nothing? No? Don't feel like you have to have a question. Yeah.
I'm curious, I have only read a handful of graphic novels in my life, and the ones that I've read I really, really, really love. But I don't know where a person goes. They were things that might have gotten recommended to me, or I don't know how I stumbled on them. And so where does a person go to find more graphic novels information or recommendations or reviews or that?
Well, you know what's really a great thing about the changing of our culture since I was a kid, when comics were like this junk thing that nobody would want to be caught reading, is librarians have become some of the greatest proponents of graphic novels. And that's both in public libraries, school libraries, elementary, middle, college, wherever. So they are often on the forefront of what, new stuff is out there. If you go in and talk to them and tell them say you love Mouse or Marjan Satrapi's Persepolis, they'd be able to tell you other books, in a similar memoir, historical vein. And there's so many out there. I mean, the market for great graphic novels is just as wide as great fiction or great nonfiction. I mean, in every genre. Comic stores are gotten better. They're not all like the guy in The Simpsons. Again, if you tell them what your tastes are, they'll be sure to point you in the right direction. So that's where I would start. Thank you, everybody. Oh, one last one.
So before you went to New Orleans, though,
Yeah.
your training, you were already drawing?
Yeah, I was a cartoonist. I've been drawing comics since I was 4 years old, and I started out doing superhero comics, and then when I got to college, I kind of started to lose interest in that whole genre type of storytelling, and I was much more interested in the real world, and I was reading the New York Times and getting involved in demonstrations and anti-apartheid movement and all that kind of stuff. And the disconnect between comics and what I was interested in other ways caused me to kind of go away from comics for a while. But when I belatedly discovered that there was this whole other world of Harvey Pekar and American Splendor, who I ended up illustrating for a long time, or Mouse, or Chris Ware and Jimmy Corrigan, all this great work that was being done in the alternative comics arena. And then I sort of slowly shifted from doing autobiographical stuff to journalism. It was sort of, that was the process. So by the time I had finished my deployment in New Orleans and had, sort of searching about my next project, I had already established a reputation, as it were, as a nonfiction cartoonist. And sort of taking the next step and doing comics as journalism seemed very natural to me and fit into my process that I already used anyhow. So it's definitely been sort of a back passage of becoming a journalist after I had already become a cartoonist, as opposed to the other way around. Thank you, guys.